Hey everybody, this is Russ from RetroGameCore. So, if you saw yesterday's video, which was a starter guide for this device here, the RGB10 Max, you'll know that the event that prompted this video is that I needed to change out the screen. Long story short, a friend of mine ended up spilling water on his RGB10 Max, and so in today's video, I'm going to show you how to swap out a screen in case you ever need to do this for your own device. Now, honestly, this is a solution for kind of a rare problem. All the same, I think this would be of benefit in case you need to change the screen out on any other device that you happen to own. So who knows, even if you don't own this device, you might learn something here, or at least just enjoy the video as it unfolds. Either way, let's go ahead and get started, so without any further delay, let's knock it out. Now, I could probably spend a whole video talking smack about PowKiddy and some of these other Chinese brands who have some real issues when it comes to quality control. But one of the things I actually admire about PowKiddy is that for the RGB10 Max, they actually sell all of the components on their website. So if you're looking to swap out buttons or you need a replacement joystick, all of those are available on their website. And I'll leave a link to that in the video description below. And so that's what my friend did. He ended up buying a new screen from PowKiddy and then sending the screen to my house instead of his. And along the way, he also sent me his device too. Now, the screen also came with a little bit of double-sided tape, which is convenient, but not quite enough for this screen. And so in addition to using double-sided tape, I recommend using a B7000 adhesive glue as well. But yeah, here's the screen here, no frills. It does feel fairly thin and cheap. So let's go ahead and open up the back of this device. You're going to need a little bit of tweezers to pull off these screw covers. And on the back, they're just these typical Phillips head screws. Once you have the screws off, you're going to want to use your thumbnail to go around the edge of the seam here. The device has these small clips that you're going to want to hit with your thumbnail. And then, hopefully, very gently, you'll be able to pull it apart. And it won't explode on you like it just did for me. That scared the crap out of me. Anyway, just try to do it as gently as possible. You can see it scared me so much that I accidentally unplugged the battery and the speaker as well at the same time. Okay, so let's start taking this thing apart. We'll start with the analog sticks first. Now these screws are a different size than the back screws, so make sure you keep the screws separate. But they're all Phillips head, so you don't need to use a new screwdriver. There's also going to be 5 screws holding down the PCB itself, and these are of a different size as well, so keep these separate too. After that, you're going to want to flip up the thing holding down the ribbon cable, then remove the ribbon cable, and now you should be able to slide the PCB right out. One button that's usually connected to the PCB is the Wi-Fi toggle. So if that doesn't fall off like it did for me, just go ahead and take that off. There are also some smaller buttons here. You have the power and reset buttons. And these are usually connected by a small piece of plastic, but mine obviously were not. After that, you can remove the remaining buttons as well as the membranes holding the face buttons and the D-pad together. There's also going to be a volume rocker on the top left. Okay, so now that we have all the buttons removed, let's go ahead and remove the screen next. And to do this, you're going to want to use a hairdryer or a heat gun if you have it. And the reason you want this is because you want to loosen up the adhesive that's holding the screen in place. Typically you would go around the edges like this with the hairdryer, but this one's actually taped in the center of the device. Now unfortunately, I can't use a hairdryer at my desk, it actually will trip a circuit. And so because of that, I have to do it off camera, but I'll be back in a second. So it usually takes 2 or 3 minutes to heat up the screen enough so that you can remove it easily. And typically you want to use a small tool, maybe a butter knife, just to get in there and start pulling it apart. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this screen feels really cheap, and as you see right here, as I started pulling it apart, I actually pulled apart the screen itself. Luckily, I didn't plan on keeping this screen, but if you are going to keep your screen, make sure you're very careful about when you pry it open. And I only heated up mine for about 2 minutes, but it looks like I probably should have done 3 minutes. So if you're going to do this yourself, make sure it's nice and warm before you start to pull it apart. It shouldn't be as hard as how it was for me right then. Granted, I knew I wasn't going to be keeping the screen, so I wasn't that careful about it. After that, I recommend removing the old double-sided tape just to make it a little bit cleaner when you reinstall. And I always recommend to practice putting it in first before you start putting any adhesive in. Make sure that you have the ribbon cable to the left of the device, and make sure that it fits and everything works okay. After that, we're good to go. Let's put on some of that double-sided tape again. And then I'm also going to add some of this B7000 glue here on the right side of the screen. In particular, this device has had some issues with the screen popping up on that side. And that's really it. A little bit goes a long way with this adhesive. So let's go ahead and prep the double-sided tape, and then slip the screen on. And I would recommend just using your fingers to really push it in place, make sure everything's okay. And then I would cover it with a microfiber cloth and then something heavy to weigh down the screen. I would weigh it down for maybe 20 minutes. Now, one of the hallmarks of any of my videos where I show off changing out a screen is I introduce a new book. And the novels you see here I've talked about in previous videos, so if you're interested in any of them, check out some of my other hardware mod videos. Today's book is going to be The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. Now I gotta admit, I actually haven't finished this book yet. I bought it a couple years ago to be my airplane book. This was all pre-pandemic and when I used to travel a lot for work. I got about a third of the way through it, but then the pandemic hit, and I haven't been on a plane since. But what I did read about this book was very good. In a nutshell, at least as far as I got, it was about a guy who had lost his cat, and his search for this cat had basically led him on a journey of self-discovery. This book was originally written in Japanese, but the translation is really good. So I would recommend, if you're looking for a good book with some really beautiful prose, this is a great choice. Anyway, that's enough about this book. Let's get back to changing out our screen on the RGB10 Max. It's been about 20 minutes now, so let's go ahead and check the screen. And sure enough, it looks good. Everything's nice and flush with the device itself. I've seen a few complaints about how dim this screen is, and yes, it is a little bit darker than others, but honestly, I think it's still a really good screen. Alright, it's all downhill from here, so let's start adding back in the buttons and the membranes and everything else. This is really easy. You actually cannot mess this part up because all of the buttons will fit only in their specific spot. Honestly, the most challenging part of putting things back together is getting those little buttons to stay in place when you put in the PCB. So what I would recommend is use some masking tape or maybe some painter's tape, and then press those little buttons against that tape so that they stay in place. That way, when you add the PCB, you don't have to worry about those buttons falling out. So go ahead and reset that PCB, make sure that you have space for that ribbon cable to sneak through. And definitely take your time with this part, it can be a little bit tricky. After that, let's secure the PCB back into place. So we're going to put those 5 screws back into the PCB so that it's nice and tight against the case. Make sure you adjust any of those small buttons with tweezers if needed. And so now let's do the ribbon cable. Take your time with this as well, just gently coax it into its spot and then flip down the latch to secure it in place. Same thing with the analog sticks. These can be a little bit tricky to reinsert, but just take your time and then coax them right into that little spot. And there's that little plastic piece to clip them in place. Again, take as long as you need for this part. It's really not worth rushing. Same thing with the one on the left side here. After that, we're just about done. Let's go ahead and put in the shoulder buttons, and then we'll reinsert the speaker and the battery cables. It's kind of difficult to show you how to do it here at this angle, but let me show you what it looks like when it's complete. There you go. Once you have all the shoulder buttons in place, go ahead and snap the case back together. It does take a little bit of force to actually get it to snap together, but it's a very satisfying click. Okay, we're reassembled. Let's go ahead and turn it on and make sure that the screen works. And if you watched my starter guide from yesterday, you'll see that this screen actually still had some problems. I think it has to do with the ribbon cable or maybe the PCB. Either way, it takes about 20 minutes for the screen to warm up before you start seeing problems, so right here it looks great. And really, we're just about done with this video. Let's add the screws and then the screw covers, and then we're done. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and as always, be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. And we will see you next time. Happy gaming.